Hey everybody, it's the Knitty Professor, and today I thought I would look into the topic of knitting color work, specifically sweaters, with superwash yarn. So I have a couple of examples of sweaters that I have knit using superwash, and I thought it'd be interesting to kind of go over the pros and cons of that. So first we'll look at the sweaters. So I'll kind of show you. Here's one. This was actually my first colorwork sweater project. Not my first sweater, but my first colorwork sweater minus the yoke. So actually my first sweater that I made was an Icelandic sweater with a colorwork yoke. And then I got very ambitious and I decided to knit this pattern, which I've shown you a few times. Can't show you enough. It's beautiful. And I feel like I could redo it and do a better job. It's called the Seagull. The designer is Ruth Sørensen. I'm just going to pronounce it that way, given that my knowledge of Scandinavian languages is deficient. So the pattern itself, really enjoyed. You can buy this. I'm trying to remember if I got it from Schoolhouse Press. Could be. It's been a few years, but it's copyright by Ruth Sørensen. So I'll just show that to you one more time so you can look it up. Chances that it's in Ravelry are pretty high, but the pattern is great. I love the motifs. I did find a few errors on here. If you happen to decide to make this pattern and you want to know what errors I found, they're small, but they're there. I can tell you. Could be that the pattern is, in the meantime, been corrected, but I love how it's got these photographs to show you some of the techniques that are used. And one disadvantage of using superwash yarn for this project that I discovered as I was working on it is it has steeks. And steeks and superwash don't really go together very well. So I had to practically be a contortionist in the figurative sense, trying to figure out how to make the steeks stick. So I'll kind of give you a couple of examples. I showed off this sweater last summer, but not many people saw it, so I figured, well, why not show it off again in a little more detail. But for example, here you can see I stitched the steeks with my sewing machine, and I reinforced them up here with bias tape, because I was just so nervous. This is your shoulder, right? So the last thing you want is your shoulder to fall apart. And that's another example. I also used a crochet technique on the steeks. So that was one aspect of knitting this colorwork sweater with superwash yarn that proved maybe scary. I'll just put scary. You know, steeks are already scary enough. If you use wool that will felt, you don't have a problem. I may have to rescue a cat. But another thing, so this is not necessarily your highest quality superwash wool. This is from Cascade. And as you can tell, even though I don't wear this sweater on an everyday basis, there's already a fair amount of pilling. Now, I've read that superwash doesn't pill. Well, I'm here to tell you that that is not correct. There's definitely a lot of stuff fluffing off. So I do have one of those little combs that I could tackle this with, but I'm thinking I would like to do this sweater again with a rustic yarn, and we can talk a little bit about the pros and cons of superwash. Let me show you my other project, though, that I did in a superwash yarn. I'm going to fold this baby up. There were a number of things that I did wrong on the sweater that I wouldn't mind correcting, and I've obviously knit a number of sweaters since, so I think I could do that. That being said, it's, you know, I think the colors work. It's really fun to wear. I do enjoy it. Keeps me warm. It's soft. And those are some of the qualities that we want out of our superwash yarn. Here's the other one that I knit from superwash. Again, I'll kind of try to give you a global view. I really had fun with this one. Could be that the quality of this yarn is a hair better. I think the Cascade is made in China, whereas this was made in South America. And I should have the yarns out here. You can go back if you want to find the videos where I actually covered these sweaters in greater detail. Feel free. I can try to look up some more details if that is desired. But the pattern, I think I just got off of the Lopi website. It's called, I'm just going to tie it, Stjanka. And when I saw those sheep, I just had to knit this. I was like, yes, I've got to buy this and knit it. It's got little trees in it, you know. Beautiful neck, the way the neck is designed. I did not follow this particular pattern to the letter because I opted for just a crew neck, as you can see. And I made a few changes in the pattern, partly because I wanted to make sure the yoke was tall enough. I feel like the pattern itself was designed for a very svelte young man, and since I have a bust, that didn't work for me. But in any case, one thing that we noticed right away with the sweater is the colors are extremely vibrant, and that is a pronounced feature of superwash wool. So there are two processes that make superwash. So in order to reduce the felting and the shrinking, the scales have to be tamed. The scales that are on the hairs of the sheep's wool. The scales on the wool make it adhere, and obviously for the sheep itself, it gives the wool a lot of qualities that are desirable, including this, you know, the fact that the wool sticks to itself, and also the insulating properties of the wool. So when you make superwash wool, obviously a lot of you know this, but just in case you're new to it, what's going on there are two options. Either remove the scales, and a lot of times that's done with a chlorine process, chlorine gas, or liquid chlorine. And apparently the liquid chlorine is less harmful for the environment than the gas. And, you know, the workers who undertake this process too, they have to be looked out for. So there are a number of issues that surround making superwash wool that have environmental consequences. And they also have consequences for the people who are participating in, you know, making this kind of wool, which has certain advantages. It's smoother because the scales are gone. So in addition to removing the scales, in this particular process where the chlorine is used, then a polymer coating is added to the wool that makes it smooth and prevents felting. Then that allows you to machine wash it, which is one of the desirable qualities. So a lot of people really appreciate that superwash wool can be tossed into the washer. Interestingly, I read that, and some of this information is courtesy of Modern Daily Knitting, the military purchases large quantities of superwash wool to make their uniforms out of. So the washability is a huge feature that is very desirable of this particular kind of wool. Now, the second process that can be used to make superwash wool entails sort of smoothing the scales against the fiber with a polymer. So you kind of skip the part where the scales are literally like almost acidically removed and then replaced with a polymer. You skip that part and you just, you know, sort of compress the scales against the fiber with the polymer. And it's a little bit less harmful for the environment. One thing that I read about these processes is that they tend to be proprietary, and the companies that do the process don't care to share the details of how it works because they don't want it to be stolen. So I did read that some of the ways that this process is going about are secret. So when you buy superwash yarn, you may really not know how it was produced. There is a kind of superwash yarns called O yarn, which is a little bit less environmentally harmful. But when you start talking about polymers, it's basically a plastic and it's not as biodegradable. So that's sort of the environmental issue of superwash yarn. Now, superwash yarn also, since it's smoother, it also has less bounce. It has less sort of, springiness to it. And that's also partly a function of adding this polymer to the yarn. One of the things that I learned as I was researching this topic is that superwash yarn has a higher level of grist. And if you don't know what that is, it has to do with the relative weight of the yarn, the relative density. So I actually weighed these two sweaters, this one and this one. And so the blue one is made of a DK, and this is sort of a, let's call it a light worsted. And this sweater here is made of worsted weight yarn that is rustic. So it is not superwash. This sweater weighs 1 pound, 5 ounces. This sweater of superwash is 1 pound, 9 ounces. And this sweater is 1 pound, 13 ounces. Now this one's a little longer, so that also helps to explain the weight. So let's just be fair. But these two are the same size. And the rustic sweater, the rustic yarn, is lighter in weight, has less grist than the superwash yarn. So because superwash yarn has this added material to it, it makes it heavier and it makes it more inclined to sag. And the springiness, you can find that, I might find that this sweater over the years, it tends to just get a little bigger. And I actually have indeed found that. I do wear this a fair amount because I love it. And the advantage of, the bright colors, superwash yarn really lends itself to acid dyes. So independent dyers, yarn dyers really prefer it because it picks up the dye extremely well. It's not to say that, we didn't succeed here with some really cool colors in the rustic type yarn. So it's not to say that you can't have really cool colors in normal yarn as well. But I think based on everything that I have found, that superwash wool really lends itself to brilliant, like neon colors and stuff like that. And dyers find it easier to work with. So there you have it. That, it's going to have that place, in the market where if you're going for bright, vibrant colors, which I definitely do on a regular basis, I get really torn, because I want, on the one hand, the plastic-free wool that just has all of the normal qualities. I wash my sweaters in the washing machine, but I have a washing machine that has a hand wash setting, so I don't have an issue with it. But many of us don't have that. And I certainly wouldn't want to have to labor over, hand washing all my sweaters in the sink. That would, no, I wouldn't want to do that. And I was looking into, so when we talk about grist and the weight of the yarn, I have more superwash wool. I'm not sure how much more I would add to my stash on purpose, but I do have a lot of this Malabrigo that I acquired in the day, and I do intend to use it. Where I do sort of fall off the wagon a little bit in my disinclination to purchase superwash yarn is sock yarn. So I like bold colors. It's got nylon in it, so that helps to counteract the sagging effect. And I think it's safe to say that more than half of my sock yarn and the socks I've made of that yarn is from superwash. Now, I'd like to think that some of that is that wool. I don't know, right? It's hard to know. But these skeins are, I looked it up, it's considered a light worsted. This is the Rios. And the 100-gram skein has 210 yards. Whereas this Peyton's yarn, this is just merino. It says classic wool. It is not superwash, and it has 223 yards. So what happens is, because the yarn is lighter, you get more length per weight, right? Because it has less grist. So I find that really interesting. So I think that kind of covers this topic of knitting color work with superwash. You are probably going to get pretty good definition. One of the things that is characteristic of superwash yarn is that, and you might be able to tell here, it has to have a higher twist. Just because of the nature of the yarn. It's more likely to lose its structure without that high twist. Whereas something that is made of a rustic wool doesn't have to have that high twist. Now, I've heard people argue that therefore the definition on the colorwork is a little bit less evident. You know, and you can tell me probably just by looking at these whether or not you agree with that. You know, I think possibly, right? Choosing your colors properly and using good technique with the dominance of the yarn is going to counteract any disadvantage in that regard. But personally, I prefer knitting colorwork with rustic yarn. Partly because I like the outcome. I like a sweater that doesn't sag as much. I like a sweater that isn't as heavy. I have no problems hand washing my sweaters in a machine. Just the fact that they are less heavy on my body, I really appreciate. I like the natural qualities of wool. I like the bounciness. I like the insulating properties. And I find that if I look hard enough, I can get the colors that I want and the variety of colors that I want for my color work, especially if I use like the right patterns and the right sort of color theory techniques of contrast and harmony. There's a cat and that kind of thing. But there's certainly a place for color work done with superwash yarn, and I probably would close with the thought that, you know, quality counts. This yarn is from Cascade, and their price point is really good, but what's happened to this sweater just by lying on the shelf and stuff is not really great because it's just got so much extraneous fuzz, and then of course your definition leaves, you know, it's just not there anymore. Whereas I think if I had used a non-superwash yarn, then this would last longer, and all the work that I invested into it, hey Mistletoe, would be protected more. So let me know your thoughts about the pros and cons, and you know, quality issues, pilling, sag, all that good stuff. Mistletoe, I know, would love to hear from you. And thanks for listening, and good luck with your color projects. Hope they turn out great, and we'll talk soon with Mistletoe about another fascinating knitting topic. So y'all have a wonderful day. Ciao.